Now, last time we met, we were talking about legislative priority one pagers, and I left you with a cliffhanger. How do I know which bills I should be monitoring? Well, I've got a surprise for you on this week's Better Advocacy in 10 minutes or less. Not only will we be covering which bills to monitor, but how to do it. All right, let's get started. The first question you need to ask yourself is, how do I decide what bills to monitor? The most important thing to consider is content. You want to spend your limited resources on the most impactful bills. These are the ones that directly impact your passion in both positive and negative ways. Don't neglect those bad bills. They're especially important to pay attention to because it's much easier to kill a bad bill before it becomes law than trying to change a law once it's gone into effect. Now, the other thing you want to think about is quantity. How many bills can you and your team realistically monitor? Now, the legislature will likely have thousands of bills introduced every single year, so it's impossible to stay on top of each one effectively. Figure out how many you can realistically monitor and choose your bills accordingly. Usually, bills impacting you will mainly be heard in the same committee, so that will ease some of the burden. Also, work with other organizations with a similar mission. See which they're monitoring, and you can focus your efforts on the others while following their updates on that other set. Okay, once you figured out which bills you're going to monitor, now you have to figure out what information I need. Okay, first of all, you want to find that patron. Even if it's not your bill, you still want to know the patron. If it's a good bill, you can talk to them and find out how you can support that bill. If it's a bad bill, then you can go to that patron and explain your concerns. I'd say almost 50% of bad bills, if it's not part of a party's platform or that legislator's agenda, get amended or withdrawn when a legislator realizes there is organized opposition to it. Okay, next, you need to track the bill content. Bill content doesn't just mean the original text, which you should definitely understand, but also the amendments and supplementary documents like that fiscal impact statement. You need to know and understand any changes to any of these so you can adjust your advocacy accordingly. I've seen bills admitted so much in one hearing that an organization that went in supporting the bill left opposing it. Now, every time a bill gets amended, the fiscal impact statement should be updated too. Does this always happen in a timely manner? No, not really. These are still done manually by bureaucrats, and there are only so many they can do in one day. But when amendments happen to a bill, you should be able to figure out the impact on that original fiscal impact statement without too much trouble. Finally, and probably most importantly logistically, you want to track when hearings are taking place, both time and location, especially if your state doesn't do virtual hearings. It's vital to be present at hearings. Of course, you want to be there to speak for or against a bill, but you also want to be there so the legislators get to know you and you can see who your opponents are, which legislators aren't engaged, and what arguments are being made for and against your bill, and which votes you have the best chance of flipping to your side. There's so much going on in the committee hearing. We're going to cover that in, wait for it, next week's video. All right, that's the information you want to track, but where do you find it? The best option is to be present in the committee meetings or stream them if that's an option. But let's be honest, unless you're tracking only a couple of bills, you won't be able to catch every hearing or understand the details of all the amendments in real time. If that's the case, then your official state website is the best place to start. Now, the speed that they are updated with will vary from state to state, but it's where all the other sites are pulling from. It might not be the most user friendly or easily searchable, but it will be the first online source for any of this information. Usually you can sign up for alerts, but be aware of the timeliness of those alerts. Sometimes they're only pushed out every 24 hours, and in the middle of session, that's too long to wait for an update. Now, another option are the free aggregator sites. In Virginia, these include sites like vpap.org and richmondsunlight.com. Your state will have its own sites. These sites usually have some basic value add over the official state site. Some are more searchable, others allow comments and cross-referencing. Now, before session starts, you should take some time to familiarize yourself with the different options available to you and see which ones work best for your needs. Now, there are also sites with paid subscriptions. I've never used these, so I'm not going to endorse any, but they do exist, and depending on the size of your team and budget, they could be an option for your team. Finally, you want to consider how often to monitor those bills. Normally, I would say once a day during session. Always check after committee hearing to make sure you have all the updates. Also, be sure to check 24 hours before a committee hearing to see the location and time. You know what? Those things do change. Finally, on the morning of a hearing, get up early and check for any last minute updates, time changes, room changes, docket changes. If you have a good relationship with the bill sponsor, ask that staffer to let you know of any changes. Usually, the notification system for legislators is faster than the public version. Plus, these legislators want their bill to pass, and they know the more support they have from the public, that's you, the more likely it is to pass. Now, the last item we're going to dig into is how do I organize and share information? It does not matter how good your monitoring is or how much data you've collected if it's not organized and accessible. As I said earlier, there are paid services, but I'm not going to review any of those because I've never used them. Whether I've been working for a legislator, advocating on my own, working with a single advocacy org, or a multi-org coalition, I've always used Google Sheets and Docs. Why? It's free. People understand how to use them. They're easy to update and easily shareable. Now, here's what I include in my spreadsheets: the bill number, the chief patron, the issue, a summary, usually taken directly from the Legislative Information Services site and then slightly modified to make sure it makes sense. I also include what we call the VPAP link. That's a Virginia Public Access project that's state specific to Virginia, but it provides a lot of additional information there. The last action taken, so I know which committee or subcommittee or floor vote is just had. And finally, what the committee meeting times are for the committee I expect it to go to. Now, this I filled out before it even shows up on the docket, so I know to keep those dates and times clear on my calendar so I can be at that hearing. Now, when you put this in a sheet, in a spreadsheet, each column is sortable. Now, you'll notice I only include last action and not a whole history. Why? Because I also have a doc, a Word doc, a Google doc, whatever you like to use, associated with each bill, and I have my longer form notes there, I have my research there, and other things like that. So to keep this tracking form streamlined, I don't put any of that more detailed information in here. I also make sure I let key folks have access to that document as well as to my tracking spreadsheet. The spreadsheet and the docs are all in a shared Google Drive. See, that way everyone has access to it. All my team has access to it, and anyone I trust can update it as needed. Now, depending on the size and skill of your team, you may want gatekeepers, but that's only if you lack confidence in anyone's skills. Remember, the more gatekeepers, the slower the update and the less effective your tracking becomes, especially in the rush of committee meetings. There you go. We covered how do you decide what bills to monitor? What information do I need? Where do you find that information? How do I organize this information? Next week, we'll jump into committee meetings, so you'll have a better idea of how those work and how you can use all of this information to be prepared to turn your passion into policy. That's up next on
Better Advocacy in 10 minutes or less.